BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Andy Burke and this is the Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Monday the 2nd of June. And the takeover of Rangers is still providing the big talking points.
This US-based consortium has bought up 51% of Rangers. The takeover has gone through. We have a few details. Still, I think lots more questions to be asked though.
Plenty of questions about the plans of the new owners. And Dundee are still in the hunt for a new manager.
And he kept out the golden striker, David Healy, who was looking for his 35th goal for Northern Ireland. But he couldn't score from 12 yards against Alan McGregor.
Could they be looking to Northern Ireland for the answer? And
Aberdeen have won the Scottish Cup! That is sensational! 35 years of hurt are at an end!
As the dust settles on the domestic season, we ask our guests for some of their highlights.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Yes, lots to discuss with Stephen McGowan, Herald football writer at large, and Rory Loy, former Rangers, Dundee and Falkirk striker. Stephen, how are you getting on?
Perfectly average for a Sunday evening, thanks Andy. Doing fine.
No better way to round off the weekend, Rory, than chatting a bit of football to set our listeners up for the week.
No, just finished a bit of steak pie and about to talk about football. You can't beat
it. Good stuff. Well, Stephen, let's start with Rangers. Obviously, the takeover that's been in the offing for so long was finally confirmed last week, and the restructuring of the club seems to be going along at quite a pace. The news on Sunday that Niels Coppin, the technical director, is departing, and Dan Purdy is coming in to replace him. So the American owners are stamping their authority on the place pretty quickly.
No surprise that Niels Coppin is gone. I think that was anticipated. He was very much associated with the Philippe Clement era. So no great surprise there, Andy. Bit of a mixed bag if you look back at his signing certainly last season. Look back at Jeff Day. You look at Robin Proper, kind of mixed bag there. But also he would take responsibility for Václav Černý and Egeman as well, Hamza Egeman, who were really worked out pretty well. So a mixed bag, but I think that's got to be probably as big a priority for Rangers as appointing a head coach. I think Kevin Fairwell was a really big job there. And I think getting the recruitment right and signing a better quality of player and getting the hit rate up slightly to kind of 70% plus of the signings, I think is going to be really key to Rangers making the most of this takeover.
Yeah, I mean, Rory, we've seen what Celtic have done on the recruitment side in recent years, bringing players in, selling for a big profit. They're not getting everyone right, but their strike rate seems to be significantly higher than Rangers, and the owners have made moves to address that because, as Stephen says, recruitment is going to be key if they're going to bridge that gap.
Yeah, it is. But, they're going to need to try and strike a balance when it comes to getting players in to develop them, to sell them on. I do understand that's the model that they want to bring forward to the club, and they've done it very successfully at other clubs. However, the difference here is that Rangers fans, with the backing that the 49ers are going to give the club, expect to win trophies next season. They expect to win trophies every season. However, with 20 million flying around, whether that is meant to be going into the playing squad or not, that's how Rangers fans will read it. So they need to strike a balance between players who can come in and hit the ground running. Stephen touches on a good point. You look at the likes of Hamza Egeman, who was a good sign, but they asked far too much of him. There was a period in the season where he was playing every week. He's not a signing who's going to come in and play every week, and that's because the other signings simply weren't good enough to come in and make an impact. Černý was on loan. So they've got a balance to strike between bringing players in who are going to make the club money in the future and getting what they really need to get, instant success.
Yeah, and Stephen, I think an issue at Rangers has been making the most of the assets that they have and knowing when to sell. We've seen the likes of Ryan Kent and Alfredo Morelos in the past, guys that at one point in their Rangers career looked like they might be able to bring a bit of cash in if they were sold on, but finding the right moment to sell them on has been a bit of an issue.
It's funny, isn't it? I was discussing this with someone recently. You look back to 20 years ago when Celtic and Rangers used to always say, we are not selling clubs. We are not going to sell our best assets. These days, they're almost competing to sell for the most money. And that's the way it should be. Just what Rory's referring to there about the player trading model, it's absolutely fundamental to being profitable, to being competitive, is to have a good player trading model. And I think, to be realistic, and I think it probably will happen now, the new model, if a decent offer comes for Nico Raskan, if they get more interest for Cyril Dessers as they have, there's talk today of interest from Mohamed Diamande. I don't think there can be any delusions about this. I don't think there can be any kind of kidding themselves. I think there has to be an acceptance now that if the price is right, then they have to be selling players. There can't be any repeat of the Alfredo Morelos to Lille scenario of a couple of years ago where it was like 15, 60 million pounds on the table and they wanted more money. If the offer is decent, if it's respectable, sell them.
And I suppose this is one appointment, Dan Purdy coming in, Rory, but the big appointment the Rangers fans are waiting on is that of the new head coach. All indication seems to suggest it's looking like a shootout between Russell Martin and Davide Ancelotti. What's your thoughts on those two candidates, and is there one you would rather see come in?
No, to answer your latter question, I don't know enough about either of them. Ancelotti's obviously not went out on his own yet, so it's difficult to get a real grasp and sample size of what he wants to do and how he wants to do things. I'm sure he'll want to differ from his dad slightly. He won't want to do things exactly the same. My concern, if I was a Rangers fan, would be that these managers want to come in and try and out-football Brendan Rodgers and Celtic. And that is going to be extremely difficult to do in a very short space of time. Ange Postecoglou did do it, but he's the exception to the rule, in my opinion. So whoever comes in is going to have to come in and win games of football. If you're trying to implement a style, and people underestimate, people talk about changing formations and flipping between this formation and that formation. Other football players, they should know how to play this and that and the other. It takes a lot of work and time and effort. 6 weeks of pre-season go into building what we want to play. And whoever comes in is going to have to do that in 6 weeks. Well, the longer it takes, less and less. And try and come in and play a style of football. In my opinion, Russell Martin and Ancelotti will want to play the ball on the ground and pop it around. At this moment in time, Rangers are nowhere near at the stage of competing against Celtic in that department. So it's going to be interesting to see how they start, how long the fans stick with them if they do that, because I don't see one of these guys coming in and being able to take the bull by the horns and win game after game after game. If that is going to be their uptake, they need to find a way to win games first.
Do you get a sense, Stephen, which of these candidates the Rangers fans might prefer to see come in? Because as Rory said, both like all managerial appointments, both come with an element of risk attached to them.
I don't think there's any question which one they would prefer. There's been a really quite I don't know about hostile, but a very much an indifferent reaction to the idea of Russell Martin coming in. I don't know if that's because they're judging Russell Martin the player rather than Russell Martin the manager. Obviously, he had his problems with, kind of tactical issues at Southampton latterly there. But I think there is a big gamble and a risk element attached to Davide Ancelotti, but I think the fans would rather take that gamble than go with Russell Martin, which, I don't know if that's a view I would necessarily agree with. I think it's maybe a bit unfair on Russell Martin. But I think they would like to take the gamble. What you don't know with Ancelotti is what you're going to get, because he's clearly a good, modern, progressive coach. But he's never been the guy standing in the touchline with 50,000 pairs of eyes burrowing into the back of his head, demanding to know what he's going to do against 11 men behind the ball on a dry, bobbly pitch. So I think that's going to be fascinating to see that. I mean, they're obviously hoping that when it comes to his famous father, the apple hasn't fallen far from the tree. What we don't know is whether the apple's going to be ripe or not.
I mean, this is it. And I wonder, Rory, for a long time now, a lot of Scottish and British managers have bemoaned the fact that foreign managers are seen as exotic and exciting. And do you think that's at play a little bit here, that the exotic unknown option tends to go down better with the fans than maybe a known quantity from closer to home?
I think that can be the case with players, certainly. However, with managers, I think it's more the name Ancelotti that's holding weight rather than the where he's from or how exotic he is. I think it's just what his dad's done. To be totally honest with you, in terms of Russell Martin, the biggest gripe is he got Southampton relegated, and they had such a poor season. It's a difficult balance to strike because you look at Walter Smith, one of the most successful managers, if not the most successful manager Rangers have ever had. When he was Everton manager, he wasn't winning games every week. He was scrapping down the bottom of the league. He didn't finish bottom, of course he didn't. And he always used to say that's the biggest difference from managing the likes of Everton. It's acceptable to lose there depending on the circumstances. Not always. It's never acceptable to lose at Rangers. But he was a fantastic manager. Of course he was. Legend up here for what he did for club and country and in the eyes of the Rangers fans. And he was down at a so-called smaller club in England and was having to fight off relegation. So, Russell Martin went and won the championship and played a great brand of football whilst doing so, or got promotion from the championship even. So it's just what they have fresh in their minds is that disastrous season in the Premier League. I wouldn't be so quick to rule out. My main concern is that he'll want to come up here and play fast-flowing, slick football, and they're going to need to make a lot of signings if they want to compete with Celtic in that department.
It's funny though, Rory, isn't it? I was just going to say that, Andy, is that what was seen as a weakness down south, that kind of fast-flowing attacking football Rory's talking about, that could be a good thing at Rangers. It's a bit like Ange Postecoglou. The style that worked at Celtic doesn't necessarily work at Spurs because obviously they're up against better teams. But I do think, one of the big problems for Rangers has been breaking down stubborn defences. I think the style of football Russell Martin plays might be good at that, which is what they really need to do. They need to beat the other teams. So I would be a bit more cautious about writing them off or being quite as kind of indifferent towards them coming.
And the point that Rory made earlier, Stephen, there's a lot of excitement around the Rangers fans at the moment with this takeover, and they're hoping this is the game changer that they've been looking for. They've had a lot of false dawns with new owners over the past 10 or 15 years. But how long do they get to get this right? Because they want success on the field, but they also want long-term financial sustainability, which again has been an issue for the club. That's not going to happen overnight, but the Rangers fans need to know that they're getting closer to Celtic.
It's funny because I've looked at a lot of comments online from level-headed, sensible Rangers fans saying, look, we'll give it time. We need to see evidence of a plan, need to see evidence of structure, need to see evidence of identity. And if they see that, then they will show a bit more latitude. Well, that's okay in theory right now, when everybody's feeling quite good. But if you get into a scenario where Ancelotti comes in, for example, and he's 7 points behind Celtic going into October again, like so many recent Rangers fans, then it'll be interesting to see how much the patience holds up then. I think at the moment there's probably quite a long extension of rope because of the goodwill towards the new owners. I think people will want to give them a bit of time and a bit of latitude, but I don't think you would say that Rangers and Celtic are clubs where the fans are necessarily renowned for their patience. So that will be one of the interesting aspects of the new season, I think.
A late entry for understatement of the season there, Stephen. And what about the situation? Obviously, the owners coming in, Andrew Kavanagh and the 49ers Enterprise fellas have got this interest in Leeds United as well, Rory. And I was interested to see a few comments from Leeds fans saying, hold on a minute, these guys should have their hands full running Leeds United. Did you think there'll be any concerns from Rangers fans on that front, running two really high-profile clubs, and if these guys are going to be able to do both and do the best for both clubs simultaneously?
No, I don't think so. I think if somebody had painted this scenario for every Rangers fan back in January, they'd have bitten your hand off, whether they own 2 clubs or 10 clubs. It's given Rangers potentially an opportunity they may never have had. But it'd be interesting again because Leeds will get promoted and Leeds won't have it all their own way next year. So, fast forward a year, what will the Leeds fans be saying about the people who are in place and all the rest of it if they're struggling next year? It's the way of the world in terms of down in England. There's teams who are, you see it all the time, who are too good for the Championship but not good enough for the top flight, and they're caught in that kind of yo-yo where 1 minute managers and you see it all the time. Same manager gets teams relegated continuously, then gets another team promoted, and it's just a cycle. We talk about the managerial roundabout up here. It happens all the time in England. So it'd be interesting to see where Leeds are at this time next year. But in terms of Rangers, no, I don't think for a second it'll be at the forefront of any Rangers fans' mind. How are they going to work Rangers and Leeds United? I think they'll just be grateful that this opportunity has arisen.
Well, we wait for news of the new Rangers manager. Still some other vacancies needing filled, especially Dundee. Stephen, Linfield boss David Healy, the latest name linked with that job. We've previously heard Sean Maloney and Charlie Adams' names been thrown into the mix. David Healy, what do you think of that? Would he be a good fit at Dens Park?
I think he's been looking for a job in Scotland for quite a while. He's been linked to a few positions. I think he had opportunities where he decided to stay put. I mean, I think whoever goes in at Dundee, to be fair, like most clubs in the Premiership now, should have a watertight contract and a good lawyer. Because you're looking at a scenario where there would be 5 clubs going into the new season with a new manager. I was working this out recently because I've probably got too much time on my hands, but the average shelf life of a Premiership manager now is 12.75 months. A little over a year. So you don't get very long. Dundee are one of 4 clubs in the Premiership who are going to the new season. They're going to have to be on their 7th manager since 2019, the winter window of 2019. So, it's quite a high hit rate. There's not a great deal of security. I think Dundee, there was an expectation that they would be looking at someone maybe be known to Gordon Strachan, like Sean Maloney. Scott Brown was mentioned as well. I think he's certainly interested. So David Healy is a bit of a left field emerging name. But I think all you would say is whoever gets a job, you really do wish them luck.
Yeah, I think that's it. Isn't it, Rory? And another job, we're talking about the Rangers, the new Rangers manager hitting the ground running. It's no less important at Dens Park when, as Stephen's outlined, the managers there have not been given a hell of a lot of time to get it right.
No, they haven't. And I was really, really disappointed to see Tony Docherty lose his job. I don't think he deserved to lose his job. I think it came as a shock to him. I can understand that the club feel possibly that they've went backwards, and the fact that Dundee United have stepped into the league and finished in the top half probably doesn't help. But, John Nelms and the board and the guys above have got to take stock and recognise what's achievable and what is not achievable at Dundee. Yes, they should be better than 10th with the squad they had, and they underperformed last season. Absolutely accept that. Is that a sacking offence in your second season back in the league when you're trying to sustain that status and not be a yo-yo club? I think if you were under somebody who was far less experienced than Tony Docherty, and I know he's only stepped out in management himself on his own for the last couple of years, I genuinely think if given the opportunity, he would consolidate Dundee as a top tier side and go from strength to strength with them. That doesn't mean it's all rainbows all the time and they're finishing 4th and 5th and 6th. There's going to be seasons where it's more difficult. I think had he finished 10th in his first season and 6th in his second season, it's a different dynamic. So I do understand why there was disappointment there, but it was a bridge too far, in my opinion, to relieve him of his duties. In previous times when Nuddy have sacked managers, they've always known who was going to come in, whether it was a good appointment or a bad appointment. If it's somebody lined up, I worry for Dundee next year. I really worry for Dundee.
There's been a lot of chat about the Dundee vacancy, Stephen. Not so much around Motherwell at the moment, and maybe that's because perhaps Dundee had more of a sense that there would be a vacancy, that they'd maybe decided a little while ago Tony Docherty hadn't got what they wanted from him, or given what they wanted from him this season. How do you see the Fir Park board going with this appointment? Michael Wimmer, I think, came out of very left field to get that job. Do you see them going down that road again? Do you think they might go more for a tried and tested operator in the Scottish Premiership?
Well, I think the name which springs to mind most readily is Robbie Nielsen for me. I think he's available after leaving the States and MLS. He was linked for the post in recent days. He seems an obvious safe pair of hands after being in charge of Hearts twice, Dundee United, of course. So I can absolutely see the argument for that. Again, one of the complications of Motherwell, like other clubs who are fan-owned, is that all the stakeholders, as they call it, have to have a say. And if you're going in there again, you're going to be a bit nervous because, as we've seen recently, fan-owned clubs, all it takes is 3 or 4 bad months and you're under really seriously big pressure. So, interesting, not hearing a great deal from there. I think Michael Wimmer, that was really left field that he left, wasn't it? I don't really think anyone saw that. Don't think anyone saw that coming at all. So, probably least of all Motherwell. And it's quite disappointing for him because I think that was an exciting project. So, they might be tempted to go down that road again. But if it was me, I'd pick up the phone to Robbie Nielsen and say, in you come.
Yeah, Michael Wimmer arrived from left field and departed to left field. But what do you think about that, Rory? Robbie Nielsen, Stephen saying there, the issue around the fan ownership around the club, but he's got experience of that from Hearts. Do you see him being a good fit at Fir Park?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see why not. I think in terms of, you look at Hearts and there was a lot of chat around every manager's a risk, but in terms of risk versus rewards, Derek McInnes was probably as safe as houses in terms of the risk involved. I think Robbie Nielsen's pretty similar for Motherwell. I don't like the cliches of he knows the league and he knows the players, etc. But it is relevant to an extent. And one thing that he has had is success. Whether Hearts fans enjoyed how he played or his personality or how he came across or not, he had a level of success at Hearts where they were consistently finishing in good positions in the league. So he has got pedigree. The difference is, and it's quite rare, Stephen touching on managers losing their job, he wasn't actually sacked, Michael Wimmer. So they might look at it and go, do you know what, we like what he did and, we could see where we're going and we're thoroughly disappointed he left. So they might not be, too concerned about going a bit more left field again and getting somebody from the continent. However, if they are to stay within Scotland, then Robbie Nielsen, by no uncertain terms, is a good shout.
Right, gents. Well, the dust has settled on the domestic football season, and we're going to get your highlights just now, whether that's a fairy tale, a surprise package, a big letdown, a favourite moment. Rory, we'll start with you. What have been the standouts for you this season?
Well, as soon as I seen fairy tale or heard fairy tale there, Queen's Park, of course, springs to mind. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was the trigger for one of the worst runs of form in the country after it. But that day at Ibrox was just incredible. And that sense of they got the penalty in the last minute, and it's very rare that you look at that situation and go, I don't think he's going to score here. Tavernier, he didn't look confident. And Ferry pulls off a wonder save. Absolutely fantastic. So in terms of fairy tales, that one springs to mind. Surprise packages, Rocky Bashiri. Did not see that coming the last 7 months of the season. Absolutely outstanding.
Stephen, some good selections there. What do you think? What have been the standouts for you this past campaign?
I don't know about fairy tales, a tough one because Scottish football doesn't throw up too many fairy tales these days, let's be honest. But it's funny enough, the man himself used the word to describe it, and the one that took me left field was Victor Wanyama returning to Dunfermline when this former
left field.
Well, when this former Champions League finalist suddenly pops up at Dunfermline, look, there's no fairy tale to that. When a club has a few quid and they offer it to a player, then that's what tends to happen. Surprise package of the season, maybe this will be a surprising choice for me, was actually Daizen Maeda. Because I don't think anyone saw Daizen Maeda as a player who was going to score 34, 35 goals or whatever. I mean, he was always a centre forward for his country, for Japan. But when he played in the left, he tended to be a player for Celtic who was more likely to shank the ball out the pitch and hit the corner flag on the other side sometimes. So for him to emerge as a really effective replacement for Kyogo Furuhashi was a surprise to me. Disappointment of the season would have been Aberdeen falling off a cliff. I thought that really, we talk about league reconstruction, but I just think if you get a challenge like that, it's a bit unexpected. I think it invigorates the game more than anything else. And funny enough, they were also featuring my favourite moment of the season because I was doing the late, much maligned The Nine on the BBC Scotland channel on a Wednesday night in November when Esther Sockler made it 3-2 for Aberdeen at Easter Road. And Sheila Bailey says to me, what does that mean for David Gray? And I said, well, that's it. He's a goner. He's a dead man walking. He can't possibly survive that. I hadn't even got the words out of my mouth before Sheila said, hang on a minute, Rocky Bashiri's made it 3-3. and it just flipped the seasons of the two teams on their heads. Aberdeen suddenly started going down a manhole when Hibs we're onwards and upwards to this remarkable kind of end to the season, which was fantastic. It just shows you Scottish football, you always expect the unexpected.
That eats into my favourite moment as well, because in terms of favourite moments, I have no affiliation to either Edinburgh club, but see Sunshine on Leith after they beat Hearts in the derby in February, goosebumps. I watched that video I don't know how many times. It was unbelievable, that video, and just shows what football can do to people. Loved that.
Yep, Scottish football, there's nothing quite like it. Guys, great to chat as always. Thanks to Stephen McGowan and Rory Loy, and thanks to you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so make sure you don't miss out. Subscribe on BBC Sounds, have push notifications turned on your phone, and you'll be notified when every new episode drops. But from Stephen, from Rory and from me, thanks for listening.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
It caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.